Hello, my friends. Today, I want to talk about how you can reduce your reactivity because if you're anything like me and many of the people and physicians that I know, there are many, many micro moments throughout the day when we kind of lose it, right? When we snap at somebody, when we say something that we regret, and that leaves us exhausted. It leaves us feeling crappy about ourselves. It leaves us not able to achieve what it is that we want to achieve. So, what I want to do today is look at reactivity, really put it under the microscope, get to know it a little bit more. Very importantly, think about how you can reduce yours, what some simple mindfulness and other hacks you can use are, so that you can really live with the quality of life you deserve to have. So let's take a look at what reactivity looks like for many physicians and guess what? For many non-physicians as well, because we physicians are simply humans. And then we'll dive into how you can overcome it. Well, there are multiple ways that reactivity shows up. One, the demands are just too many. The below grade tasks, the ever full inbox, the charts that need to be done, the interruptions, the prior auths, the begging insurance companies, the patients upon patients upon patients, day in, day out. It can just begin to feel like too much. So that's the first way that we can become reactive. Another common scenario is all the understaffing that we're seeing throughout healthcare, that you may have a rotating door of medical assistants, of nurses, of leadership. You may have this rotating door and you may have your own colleagues who are leaving and, who is left standing? Well, you with an even larger load. And you may have undertrained staff. You may have medical assistants who you've told, 5 times how to take a blood pressure and how to, document this, that, and the other thing in the record before you get into the room. And still they're not doing it. And perhaps they're even rolling their eyes when you're telling them what needs to be done. You may be experiencing anger at the system because the system is beyond broken and there is a lot to be annoyed, frustrated, and angry about. And, you may also be feeling like those people who are supposedly leading this endeavor that you're in, whatever enterprise it is that you're working for, that they don't really have a clue what they're doing. So all of these things can push our buttons and make us very reactive. Not to mention the ways that we can be reactive when we get at home, right? With our teenagers, with our spouses, with our aging parents, and with anybody else that we have to deal with. So let me give you 2 vignettes to kind of make this a little bit more real. The first one is from my book, Mindful MD, 6 Ways Mindfulness Restores Your Autonomy and Cures Healthcare Burnout. And by the way, the third way is reducing reactivity. So in the chapter on reducing reactivity, I share a vignette of a physician who I call Anil, a very busy and beloved family doc who went into the practice of family medicine because he loved, working with 5-year-olds and coaxing them to get a vaccine and then doing a dementia screen on an 85-year-old. He loved that range. But what he didn't love was all of the demands. And he, like many physicians that we all know, was always running behind on his charts, behind on keeping up on his inbox, and behind getting through his day. And when he came to coaching, really because of charting inefficiency that was becoming job threatening, he had gotten so many nasty grams from the administrators. He'd had sit downs with them. He'd tried all kinds of things. And when we did what I call my charting audit, I asked him a lot of questions about his charting, but in particular, I asked him what went through his mind as he sat down to chart. And like many of the physicians I've coached, and maybe this will resonate for you, he said, I just feel so angry about how unfair it is that I have to spend all of this time on the care and feeding of the electronic health record. Gail, I feel like there's smoke coming out of my ears. He was so angry, and no surprise that it was hard for him to focus and get his charts done. Now, I'm not going to argue with you about whether Anil had a right to be angry. I'm not going to argue about the fairness. Of course, the demands were just way too much. What I am interested in is how that pattern of anger and reactivity made it very difficult for him to get his charts done, because that was his goal. And I'm his coach, and I'm all about getting my clients to their goals. And he wasn't able to get his charts done. He was so flooded with emotion that he couldn't actually get the job done. So that's the first vignette that I'm going to share. The second is really on a personal note. I'm going to share with you my own pattern of reactivity, and I'll share that regarding me as a parent. My son is now 26. I've worked through a lot of my patterns of reactivity, which we're going to get to, some tips about how you could do that. But for many years, particularly when Davi was a teen, I was trapped in patterns of reactivity. I was raising him on my own. I had a busy academic career. I had all kinds of ethical issues in my work as a hospice doc and being pushed to admit people who weren't terminally ill so the company could keep up their numbers. You know, that's the life of a physician now, is these kind of ethical and moral dilemmas. But it played out in my home life with him as my son. You know, he'd say something to me, you know, Mom, take me to the mall. That's a classic example for a teenager. And I'd be exhausted. Maybe I'd just come home from a long day, or maybe it was a Saturday and I finally had a moment to myself. And, you know, if I said no, or I didn't buy him the latest video game, that was a common one, you know, he'd just snap at me. You know, you're the worst mom in the neighborhood. You know, Jeffrey's mom would have done this, that, and the other thing. And Henry's mom would have taken him to the mall. But you're just selfish. And what would I do? Well, I would fan the fires and snap back. I would say something to him. You don't see how hard I work. You don't see how much I care about you, how much I do for you, right? And the pattern of escalation would just increase, and we would go downward in a spiral of negativity. So that's a little bit about what reactivity can look like. And you can think for a minute about what it looks like for you, what your habitual patterns of reactivity are in the professional setting and in your personal life, because it's often with the people that we're closest to that we can actually be the most reactive. So let's kind of get to, well, what the problem is with reactivity, in case that isn't obvious. Well, we say things that we regret. We have to go into that cycle of apology, which is never pleasant to be the one, generating it. We step away from our goals. Instead of having closeness with our loved ones, we have distance. Certainly that was the case for me and how I was responding or reacting with Davi. And we do things that aren't consistent with our goals. Professionally, I've coached many people who were sent to coaching because of their patterns of reactivity. But it leaves us feeling drained. It's a hypercortisol state when we're that reactive. And if you have a lot of moments in your day when you're experiencing that reactivity, your cortisol is likely on hyperdrive. And we all know the negative effects that has on our health. So those are some of the downsides of reactivity, and I'm sure I'm missing some. So what on earth do we do? Well, this is where mindfulness throws us a lifetime, big time. So let me itemize what that is. So first and foremost, we're not always aware of when we're reactive or when we're having our early warning signs for reactivity. And at its core, mindfulness is about that awareness of what's going on around us, the reality of what's going around us, but very important, the reality of what's going on within us. For me, that's been the most important aspect of my own mindfulness journey and practice. So we become the observer of our internal patterns. It's almost like we can see it up on a stage or like a, kind of an image passing by. We become the keen observer, and we can really see when we are kind of pivoting or falling into a reactive pattern that isn't going to serve us. It's a wonderful sense of mastery when you can spot that, when you can diagnose that in yourself, because we can't treat or intervene until we diagnose. We all know that in healthcare and beyond. So that's the first way that mindfulness can really help us. The second is that when we become the observer, we see that we have a choice. We create this all-important gap between ourselves and what we're experiencing and what it is that we do next. What we do, whether we react, whether we respond, that's the freedom that mindfulness buys us, is this little bit of a gap. Instead of being entangled in that reactivity and, kind of 0 to 90, faster than a nanosecond, we actually see, I have a choice here. And in that moment of choice, we can be clear about what is our goal. Is our goal to snap at our son, for example, like my example? Is the goal, if we're charting, to get those darn charts done so we can actually have some reprieve? Or is the goal to be kind of mired in all of that anger that is only getting in our own way? So we have that clarity and we can really think about what our goal is. How do we do this? Well, meditation is the way that we become the observer. Even a few minutes of meditation every morning builds that ability to observe your inner milieu, to see more clearly what your early warning signs are for reactivity. Because just like we work with patients about early warning signs for an MI or a stroke or whatever disease you're following in your specialty, we can learn our own early warning signs. So meditation is a key strategy. It's what we do in the quiet in between the storm so that we're ready for the storm when it happens, whatever the storm is, whether it's reactivity or something else. We can also take that key purposeful pause. I talk about this in much of my writing and definitely in the Mindful MD book. We can take that purposeful pause. We can see, oh boy, my emotional temperature is rising. I am about to lose it. I can pause here. I can take a mental time out and perhaps even a physical time out and slow myself down, cool down my sympathetic overdrive, bring my parasympathetic nervous system online with a few volitional deep breaths. It's powerful and it's extremely effective. So we can take that purposeful pause to cool ourselves down, to work with our own pattern of reactivity, to notice after those early warning signs are present what it is that we want to do. A lot of this involves another mindfulness concept, which is beginner's mind, the willingness to start over, to realize, yeah, I've been reactive with my son all too many times, but you know what? I can do something differently now. That willingness to be a beginner, to not have to be the expert as a mom, as a doc, as a colleague, as an employer, whatever it is. I can actually put aside what I've done before and start anew. And honestly, with my son, when I stopped that pattern of reactivity, when I began to just see how much it was interfering with my goal of a good relationship with this beautiful son, it was incredible, because people respond. They see how we're showing up differently, and they respond differently. And I think it helped him actually work with his own tendencies of reactivity that he'd probably largely learned from his one parent, me. So those are a few tips, and maybe right now you can think about your own patterns of reactivity in the workplace, or very importantly, with someone that you're close to. Again, that's where many of us can be the most reactive. Bring to mind someone that you tend to be reactive with and think about these steps. Noticing your early warning signs for emotional reactivity and activation. Taking that vital, important, purposeful pause, cooling yourself down by pausing and taking a few slow, deep breaths. Asking yourself, well, what's my goal? And is snapping, being irritable, lashing out, going to help me achieve my goal or goals? Or is it actually going to get in my way? It's a pivotal question. And pushing yourself to be a beginner, to start again, to do something different. I really encourage you to try these things. And I'll offer one further suggestion, which is to be kind to yourself. We can all be reactive. It's part of the human condition. You don't have to chastise yourself, berate yourself. You can actually forgive yourself as long as you're willing to start again and grow and learn from your own difficulties. That's what's key here. So, that is the third way that mindfulness can restore your autonomy and cure your burnout, whether you're in healthcare or not. And I really encourage you to read that chapter of Mindful MD. And if you don't have time to read it, to follow the steps that I've outlined today. I know they're going to help you. Wishing you progress with yourself, kindness to yourself with your own patterns of reactivity, belief in your capacity to change, and in doing so, wishing you many, many moments of clarity, calm, and ease.